In the early hours of June 22, 1941, the quiet of the Eastern Front was shattered by the roar of over 3 million German soldiers, 600,000 vehicles, and 4,000 aircraft. Hitler had just launched Operation Barbarossa, the largest military invasion in history, targeting the Soviet Union in what would become one of the most brutal and devastating campaigns of World War II. This was no ordinary military strike, it was a calculated gamble. Hitler believed that within just a few months, he would conquer the Soviet Union, obliterate Stalin's Red Army, and gain control of the country's vast resources. But what the Germans didn't expect was the hellish fight they were about to encounter. As dawn broke on that fateful day, the German army launched an all-out assault across an 1,800-mile front, from the Baltic Sea in the north to the Black Sea in the south. This wasn't just any invasion, it was blitzkrieg at its most ruthless. German tanks and infantry units tore across the Soviet border with lightning speed, overwhelming Soviet defenses in just days. The Luftwaffe dominated the skies, bombing Soviet airfields and cities, while ground forces crushed the Red Army, capturing hundreds of thousands of Soviet soldiers. In the early weeks, it seemed Hitler's gamble had paid off. The Germans advanced hundreds of miles into Soviet territory, capturing key cities and cutting off entire Soviet divisions. But despite these early victories, the Soviets were not defeated. As the Germans pushed deeper into the Soviet Union, the scale of the war began to shift. The German high command was confident. They believed they could destroy the Soviet Union in just a few months. What they underestimated was the sheer size and resilience of the Soviet army and its people. Soviet forces, though battered and disorganized, began regrouping. And then came Stalin's brilliant but ruthless decision: adopt a scorched earth policy. As they retreated, Soviet troops burned everything in their path. Farms, factories, bridges, all were destroyed to leave the Germans with nothing to sustain their war effort. The Soviets also had one key advantage: time and space. The vastness of the Soviet Union was their greatest asset. While German tanks raced towards Moscow, Soviet industry was moved eastward beyond the reach of German bombs, and as the Germans got closer to the Soviet capital, they faced increasingly fierce resistance. By October, they were within striking distance of Moscow, but the German advance was slowing, and the Soviet winter was about to arrive. Winter in Russia came earlier than expected, and the Germans were not prepared. With temperatures plunging to -40 degrees Fahrenheit, their tanks and trucks froze, and their soldiers, still dressed in summer uniforms, began to suffer from frostbite. Hitler had severely underestimated the brutality of the Russian winter and the resilience of the Soviet people. While German soldiers were freezing, Stalin launched a massive counteroffensive. The Red Army, bolstered by fresh troops from Siberia, pushed the Germans back from the gates of Moscow. The tides were turning, and the momentum that had carried the Germans through the summer had vanished in the snowdrifts of winter. What was supposed to be a quick and decisive campaign had turned into a long, grueling conflict. Hitler's dream of conquering the Soviet Union in mere months had shattered. Operation Barbarossa failed, and it was a failure that would haunt Nazi Germany for the rest of the war. The invasion was supposed to break the Soviet Union, but instead it became the beginning of the end for Nazi Germany. The sheer loss of life on the Eastern Front was unimaginable. Barbarossa opened up a brutal front that would grind on for years, ultimately leading to Germany's collapse. Operation Barbarossa remains the largest military invasion in history, an audacious gamble that forever changed the course of World War II. The failure of the operation exposed the limits of Nazi power and set the stage for the eventual Soviet counteroffensive that would bring the Red Army to Berlin itself. If you want to understand how the war even got to this point, make sure to check out our video, How Did World War II Begin?, to dive into the complex origins of the conflict that led to this massive invasion. Click now.